All right, everybody, welcome back to the Team Coaching Zone. Here we are on Friday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, and we have a great group joining us today. We've got Lighthouse Organizational Development from Vienna, Austria in the zone, and really excited to have this group of practitioners on. I know Kevin Daly going back. Kevin, it must be more than a decade, maybe 15 years even. I used to travel a lot to Vienna. I was doing a lot of work for the United Nations and was introduced to Kevin, and we've stayed connected over the years, and it's been great to see him. He founded Lighthouse and how this company has evolved and brought on a select group of his colleagues from Lighthouse to kick it around today. So Lighthouse Organization Development Consulting, welcome to the Team Coaching Zone.
Thanks, Krister. It's great to be here. Great to see you.
Yes, indeed. So Kevin, I think I'll start with you, and maybe what we could do is have you just briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and Lighthouse, and then if you want to introduce your colleagues or have them introduce themselves briefly, it'd be great to know a little bit who's on the call today.
Sure. Yeah, I'll kick off with myself and then a little bit about Lighthouse, and then I'll hand it over to my colleagues. Thanks again, Krister, for bringing us on. The 15-year journey that we've been on together, I hope it's been mutually beneficial for me. It's been great because I continue to learn from you, and you have especially supported me in my own practice as a team performance coach. So great to be here. Thanks for inviting us. So I'm originally from San Diego. I moved to Vienna in 1996. I thought I would be here for 1 year, and more than half my life later, I'm still here. So I quite like it. This also scares me, 29 years, so almost 3-decade career has been devoted to the field of learning and development in my capacity as coach, trainer, consultant, working both in public sector and private sector. Maybe I'll get into this a little bit later. I actually literally stumbled into team performance coaching in upstate New York back in 1994. I didn't even think that I was doing team coaching, but now that I look back on it, that's actually what I was doing. At Lighthouse, together with my business partner, Peter, we founded Lighthouse 11 years ago. And we're an interdisciplinary team of specialists in coaching, training, consulting. We're about 10, I would say, coaches, trainers, and consultants. And the areas that we focus on are team effectiveness, learning technology, so e-learning academies, also leadership development. We have 3 Agile coaches, and then change, which Tim will probably talk about here in a second. So a lot of what we do in person is the CEE, SEE, so Central Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, or as some like to say, from the Black Forest to the Black Sea. So from Munich to Bucharest. Although with the pandemic, we've been able to spread our wings a little bit wider across the globe and do some initiatives with other clients. The main areas that we focus on are, we're very much engaged in the energy industry, also banking and finance. We do some work with United Nations here in Vienna, IT, hospitality, and paper and packaging. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Where I spend probably about 80% of my time these days is team performance coaching. So working together mostly with leadership teams, anywhere from 6 months over to some teams I've been working with now for 4 years. Just helping these teams become more effective, helping these teams deal with what has been a maddening 3 or 4 years. So that's me, that's Lighthouse. And I hand it over to whoever's ready, Liz, Tim, or Elizabeth.
Why don't we go ladies first? So Liz, why don't you go?
Oh, okay. I've also, thinking about it, known Kevin for a very long time, and known Lighthouse, so I've been in Austria now for about 17 years. Had a similar story to Kevin in terms of I came to Austria for 2 years, and yes, I got stuck here, but it's a nice place to be stuck. And my background, and met Kevin the year that I moved here. So have been in contact with Lighthouse and Kevin since then. And predominantly my career, very similar to Kevin's, has been focused on learning and development and organizational development. And in the last 10 years, I've had the luck and interesting path of being very immersed in the startup scale-up world and really building up the people and culture functions, and also supporting the executive team in building up those organizations as a whole. So yeah, very much the team effectiveness, team coaching, leadership development, building organizations has been a huge focus of my career.
Awesome.
I can still remember, Liz, our first engagement in Prague about 15 years ago.
That's right. The road trip to Prague.
The road trip to Prague that we survived.
Yes, I seem to be the only Austrian on this one, out of Vienna. Interesting. Never thought of it that way. So my name is Elizabeth Overbeke. I am the Austrian on the team, but I've spent majority of my life actually outside Austria. So also in the US for a significant amount of time, as we had said, Christer. I spent 25 years almost in global corporate international organizations, focusing on pretty much all areas of organizational effectiveness, team effectiveness, change management, and OE. Before I set myself up as an independent consultant a couple of years ago to focus on the things that I love most, which is the whole leadership development and team effectiveness space here in Vienna. And that's, so Kevin, I know you from my corporate life.
Was it you're a client, Elizabeth?
Kevin was my consultant.
Okay.
And I was the client. Yeah, very interesting space.
Yeah.
But we always said you always meet twice, and there you go.
I remember, Elizabeth, we were working together. We were co-creating an initiative that you were running on joy at work.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, me too. Around 2010, 11. So.
Well, I must admit it. I think we have now found joy at work.
You did.
So I'll go last. I'm just going to complete the international group we've got here. I'm Tim Bosworth. I'm British, but I also found myself in Austria. I also met Kevin when I first got here. He is the glue for this team.
He's the lighthouse, right?
He is the lighthouse,
right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And over the last 10 years that I've worked with Lighthouse, so much has changed, so much that has gone on with the way with which we've operated. But there's certainly the focus for me has always been working with all the teams that we work with, and the team effectiveness is something that I do a lot of with as well. But I'm also the lead in the practice for the change, and I'm very, very passionate about that. It's going to be a central theme actually about anything that certainly comes up in our discussions from myself and the sorts of people that I interact with. My background is like Elizabeth, worked in the corporate commercial world for many, many years. I'm super happy that I am where I am because I get very bored, and maybe that's where the change comes from. So I like to go from one kind of challenge to another. And I do a lot of coaching with these guys. It's just a pleasure to work with everybody that we got on the call right now. And of course, the Lighthouse team itself is a very eclectic group, so bounce off each other. So it's very, very nice to be here.
Great. Well, great to have you guys in a wonderful diversity of nationalities and where you all come from and the different backgrounds you have. Kevin, I'm going to ask you just around Lighthouse. Is there a story behind picking the name of your company? I mean, it probably goes without saying that, in this world, organizations need direction and guidance and beacons of light to guide them on where they're headed. But I'm curious, I always like to ask about the names of companies.
Yeah, and JD Lanigan, friend / peer of ours, is part of that as well. So being born in San Diego, I have always loved the ocean, which is a bit of a problem living in Vienna, kind of landlocked in the Alps. But
speaking of JD, right at the moment there.
There he is.
Yeah.
JD, shout out to JD. So being born in San Diego, I've always had an affinity for the ocean, and nearby where I was born was his lighthouse. And so I can remember growing up the first 4 or 5 years of my life, always looking at that lighthouse, being interested in lighthouses in the sea. And about 11 years ago, when we founded Lighthouse, we sent out we were brainstorming what should the name be, and actually JD said, "Hey, why don't you just call it Lighthouse?" So he's been very influential, and I was like, yeah. And fortunately, my business partner Peter has a very strong connection to lighthouses. So, and then obviously, the metaphor fits in great with leadership.
Right.
The idea that we're navigating turbulent waters, and the lighthouse is a beacon of hope, something stable, something to help you out. So yeah, that's where it came from.
That's awesome. Well, maybe we could play on that a little bit. Obviously we've been kind of coming out of this pandemic, or wherever we are. We were just talking a little bit before we came on air about kind of the banking crisis here in the US. So maybe we could start with like the context of your clients, what's driving business. And, Tim, you spoke a little bit about change. So I think, the whole VUCA meme has been, overplayed, but, we're probably still, that's the real reality. And I think our world's becoming increasingly complex and tumultuous even. So I'm just curious, as you guys think now about 2023, I can't believe it's already May, but I'm curious about what's driving people to come to Lighthouse. Maybe we could start there, just around the business context, and what are some of the big pain points, and whether those link up to team effectiveness or leadership or change or all the above. I imagine that's all interdependent and interlinked. So I'd be curious to hear any thoughts about what you're noticing with your clients.
I'm happy to defer to my peers, or I can. It looks like Tim is
why don't
ready
you
to
take
go.
it, Kev? You kick off.
Yeah, I mean, Krista, you were saying this VUCA, which I think an acronym that a lot of times people maybe were tired of it. I've been calling it "Living La Vida VUCA" on steroids. With the pandemic 2020, the war here just nearby, Ukraine, Russia 2022, then also obviously what looks to be another collapse potentially of the financial system in the States. It's really this VUCA on steroids. And in fact, it was Elizabeth, Tim and I were working with a client for about 2 years, and it ended a couple months ago. She introduced us to the concept of BANI, BANI, which is now taking over for VUCA. So brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. And what I would say to your question there is this brittle, that systems. So the interconnectivity now across the globe is as high as ever, and we found that we're not really great at, or some places great, maybe not so great around interdependence around the pandemic. But because this interconnectivity, events that are taking place in one corner of the globe are having major impacts on another part of the globe in ways that we can't really comprehend. We can't, cause, effect, nonlinear. So I think the brittle systems are keeping our clients up at night, are keeping our leaders up at night, anywhere from board level to executive board members, 1, 2 team leaders, that there's this recognition, given this BANI environment, given these brittle systems, that no one person can have all the answers. And collectively, within the team, how can we work together better as a team, given the high level of expertise and collective intelligence and the unknowns that are in front of us? How can we get ourselves together and embrace this reality? And as a result of that, our clients have been reaching out to us, helping them on that journey, specifically around team effectiveness, leadership team effectiveness journey. So I think that's, for me, the key thing is this very brittle nature of what's going on. And I'll leave it with one quote from a leader. I've been working with him and his team for a while. About a year ago, he was not feeling so well, physiologically, psychologically, just, literally up at night. And what helped him get out of that funk was he looked around at the executive committee, he looked around his peers, and he realized they have no clue either. Which made him feel better about himself. So that's, I guess, we're being called in to help people sort of make sense of what's going on and find ways that they can work together better and deal with these novel problems that they're having.
Just to make a quick reaction to that. I think I was a real fan of the Cynefin framework, which, you guys may be familiar with, but it talks about the different levels of complexity in our context. And the third level is of a complex situation, where expertise actually falls short. Expertise is helpful, but actually it's a domain of emergent learning. And I think what you really described for me, Kevin, is that none of us have the answers. We do have experiences. We can maybe sense and recognize certain patterns, but a lot of this is about the ability to learn in an emergent context where nobody really can claim expertise, right? I think that's what you're describing. And I think I'll just make a point. I'd love to hear what your colleagues also think about this, but I think that's really where team coaching really can thrive, because I really see team coaching as a process of learning and change, that it is about putting in place some structures and some trajectory, but it is emergent because it's never a straight line from A to Z, and it's about your ability to pivot and learn. And I think this links up to the startup culture and the like. But anyways, just wanted to make a quick reaction and then maybe hear what other colleagues have to say about this topic and what you shared, Kevin, which is a great start.
I think you're right. And I think that the fact that we don't have all the answers is the norm, and that leads to a little bit of the A in Bonnie, which is anxious. And normally what happens to people who are afraid, or organizations where there's a lot of anxiety, is they freeze. And that's exactly what you don't need in times of significant change, large shifts. So one of the things that I've found is that in a lot of teams that we work with, one of the key leadership challenges is, how do I help my team and myself overcome the anxiety, the fear of, oh my God, we have no idea what's happening, and we don't really know what to do about it. At times, we're just going to have to take our intuition, because even our past experience won't help us necessarily predict where it's going, because it's all nonlinear. So a lot of the work that we do with, or at least I'm noticing, is that we're trying to help leaders take away the fear and the anxiety, all that in a space where they don't have the answers. So that's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, and I wanted to build on that a little bit, because certainly from a change perspective, Krista, what I've seen is that kind of prior to COVID, even, there was a lot of focus on methodology and execution. And certainly in the last year and a half, what I've noticed is that a lot of the people that we're working with, they're looking for that, but they're realizing that they need a lot more, and they need a lot more of the emotional support, whether it is the psychological safety, whether it is just how are you doing? And people are using words like, I need to know that someone cares about me. And that's a big shift for me. It's a huge shift, because it takes the change that most companies would have gone through and executed from a methodological perspective, and brings it into the very much the emotional, psychological space that the people are at. And that's just it's still different. It's very, very powerful. And so that kind of like transition versus change, and the whole kind of William Bridges stuff that many of us have worked on over the last few years is really coming back, and people are wanting to embrace it, and they're wanting to know that someone does care about me as I go through this change.
Yeah.
It's really coming up.
I imagine, Liz, your background with culture, I'm going to make a comment about living in China early on, and how I noticed that the way people related to work was very different. Almost a family kind of style, where managers were concerned not just about the work of the workers, but their home lives, their personal lives, which to me as an American would feel like that's a little bit too personal. But they actually they had a holistic view of their employees, and that they were responsible for the well-being of their employees, not just whether they were productive or not. But I'm sorry, Liz, I think I interrupted you.
No, I was going to... One point I was going to build on in what the colleagues have been saying, it also comes down to, especially the anxiety part, when people are feeling anxious and fearful, it has a level of losing trust as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's still, it goes outside of the corporate or the business world. When there's a lot of chaos happening, everyone's looking for a hero or a heroine. Yeah. And so you've got sort of a catch-22 situation, as we mentioned, where you've got leaders, saying, okay, no one really knows it all here. But you've still got your team members that are expecting, as you said, Tim, you know, someone that shows me that they're caring about me and that comes to me with some sort of communication. And this is a nice bridge then to the culture part. And I would reach out to my colleagues also to say if they see this and as sort of client base in Austria and maybe much of Central Europe, there's very much about, I think it comes from a wanting to protect our teams and protect our people and give them the good information. And so in times like this, there can be a cultural behavior of we won't communicate yet because we don't want to worry our people, but yet the human behavior of reacting to that in these Barney times is that people start to think of the worst case scenario. And so they're also, I've observed and I found that you helping leaders and team members understand that communication is key. Keeping the trust alive from both sides is key, and how to do that.
Interesting. I'm going to go back to this comment that came up around psychological safety. And I think maybe, Elizabeth, it was triggered around what you were saying about anxiety. I think it's interesting to think, I think when Amy Edmondson did the original work on psychological safety, it had to do with, it was actually in hospitals, and it had to do, I believe, with pediatric surgery in particular, and the role of nursing and injuries. And when people felt safer, they were more likely to report things that were happening. But when they weren't feeling safe, they were actually covering up the actual injuries that was happening. But then it sounds like, Elizabeth, there's also now externally created anxiety and psychological safety. So that's one thing if we're doing it to ourselves and we're not creating good relationships between managers and employees internally. But when a lot of the anxiety is being driven externally, that creates a whole nother layer and level. So I don't know if you guys have any comments to that, or you know,
maybe just very briefly to that. Yeah, so totally agree. The whole psychological safety as a topic has obviously gotten much more airtime in the last years than it had ever before, mainly because I think of the need for it in times of anxiety and change. You do want to be as transparent as possible, to hear as much as possible about what's going on, and leaders are trying to do quite a bit around that. Externally, obviously, there's so many things happening in our environment that trigger that. There's obviously no way we can control the external as leaders, but what we can say is it's not just something that gets triggered from the inside now, it gets triggered from the outside, which might actually make it even more of a pressing issue for leaders to really pay attention to and to really keep an ear to the ground.
It's Viktor Frankl's, quote around, we can't control the stimulus, but the only thing we have between stimulus and our response is that moment to think about influencing how we respond. And I think most of us, individuals, teams, and organizations, tend to respond very just reactively, knee-jerk, instinctive reactions. But
you know what, Krista, just on that, a lot of the stuff we're doing with clients at the moment is around the circle of influence, circle of concern, going back to Stephen Covey stuff so many years ago, because people are almost wanting to be able to put a circle around the stuff that is the stuff that they can actually do something about. Yeah. And sometimes they just can't see that. And we're helping them do that. And when we do, you can see there's almost a collective sigh of relief in a way. Yeah. But it also brings them closer together. We do a lot of it on a team perspective. And when a team stands with each other and gains that collective effort of knowing that they all can do something about certain stuff, but not everything about all of the stuff, then it gives them an opportunity to actually come closer together. And we've witnessed that over and over again in the last few weeks and months.
I love that. It comes a little close to home for me in the sense of I got on Twitter again probably about 6 months ago after Elon Musk took over Twitter. And I quickly discovered it was very liberating because, there was all this kind of like people who had been censored were coming back on. But I suddenly found myself going down the Twitter rabbit hole, which can be pretty dark. And there's some like really dark conspiracy theory level stuff there, but I started to notice that it was really, this is the power, the dark side of social media and our devices, is we can be really shaping our worldview by the content we're reading. And then I started, that was kind of leading to this feeling of anxiety. And I was noticing, I was like, wow. And then I was hearing about all the layoffs. A lot of our clients were laying off large numbers of people. And the mind is an interesting thing. Whatever you put into it, it magnifies and focuses on. So if you keep pumping into your mind the dark side of what's going on, that just makes it worse. And so, yeah, just learning to unplug and really focusing on what you can control. I can't control that clients are laying people off, but we can look at that, where there's always opportunities, even in the darkest moments.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I fully agree. I mean, these bubbles, they start and then it just grow out of control. Where circle of influence can help leaders and teams focus on what we can control. Regarding, I frequently say that this Bonnie model, it's like VUCA injected with emotional intelligence, and a necessity for leaders to be vulnerable more than ever. So we've been using a lot of Brene Brown's work as well to lead conversations with leaders to show that, hey, I don't have all the answers, and I'm feeling this too. What's going on? And let's come together. Let's talk about it. Let's just have some open discussions about it. Let's get the elephants in the room out. Let's expose them and discuss them. And I've been part of in the team coaching practice over the last couple of years of some really amazing, vulnerable discussions around what's going on. What's going on in the macro environment? How's that impacting us, and what can we do about it? And it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, just to normalize it. And you've already shared a little bit around the circle of influence and the circle of concern from Covey and all that. But I'd love to hear a little bit about how you guys approach team effectiveness and team development. Just a little bit about the Lighthouse approach, whatever you're willing to share. You don't have to share the full trade secrets or the DNA, but I'd love to hear a little bit about like your approach to team effectiveness or team coaching, whatever you call it, and just to hear a little bit of the secret sauce of whatever you're willing to share.
I'm happy to kick that off and then bring the others into it. I mean, you've heavily influenced the secret sauce, Krister, as I've been following your career as team coach. I mean, as I said earlier when I introduced myself, I kind of stumbled into this field. I was working at a reform school for adjudicated youth in upstate New York, and we're the teenage boys, 12, 18, juvenile delinquents living on site. And I was doing adventure-based therapy, experiential learning. And at the time, I really, I didn't know what I was doing was team development. So I was co-creating with the social workers adventure-based therapy programs that would go 6 to 8 months with different cohorts. And then we actually started doing it with the staff, with the residential staff and the social care and teaching staff. So a lot of that, of my roots around team development are still in experiential learning, in adult-based learning. So it's, get people engaged, get people doing things together. That's how they best learn with each other. And then over the decades, using all sorts of different kinds of models and frameworks, whether it was Belbin, whether it was Lencioni, whether it was Tuckman, whether it was using the Neething Brain Instrument, MBTI, and just kind of putting different pieces together, sort of, patchwork actually, and creating journeys. It's really only been in the last 6-7 years since following your journey, Krister, around the team coaching zone and in your team coaching practice, where I've begun to identify as a team performance coach also. Like, hey, this is what I do. I just don't do team buildings. We just don't go to the Austrian Alps and go skiing and have some drinks and have a good laugh.
Sounds great, but probably has its value. Yeah.
Wish we did.
One doesn't exclude the other, and those are some good times and good memories. But just being a team performance coach and then helping organizations and leaders understand that great teams are not made overnight, and that it's a journey. And So following you, Krister then led me, and JD Lanigan as well, led me to the 6 team conditions. So the work that you've been doing with Ruth Vagaman and what Richard Hackman had done and your other associates, you guys introduced me to 6 team conditions and the team diagnostic survey back in 2019, 2020, and my life hasn't been the same since, nor our clients as well. So that's, I mean, I still bring in different pieces from my 30-year history of doing team development, but the foundation of everything that we're doing around team effectiveness is the 6 team conditions.
Yeah, interesting. I know you shared a story where you were one of your clients was vetting a number of different team effectiveness programs and frameworks, but they ended up going with you because they felt it was like the only one that had some real like rigor, or maybe it was the structural part of that framework. I'm curious, what have you found?
Yeah,
because some people find 6 conditions hard to sell because it's more complex than a simple 2x2, 4 grid styles, or high task or high relationship kind of models that you can see in some team effectiveness frameworks.
Can I take that one, Kev? Just to respond to that. So, Krista, the way that I see it for us now is that it's kind of like parted the clouds a little bit for a lot of the clients that we work with, because we're able to say to them now, it's not sticking our finger in the air and hoping that something will work. I know it never was, and I make light of it, but it gives us. It's almost like a scalpel that we can take to the team and say, we will point at this and we can help you do this based on what you have responded. And it constantly gets a lot of support from the clients because they are happy that someone has parted the clouds for them and given them the opportunity to actually see where they need to be doing more work. Because don't forget, when you go through the TDS itself, the Team Dynamic Survey, often a lot of the stuff that they think is going really well is actually the stuff that is impacting the stuff that's going really badly, and they don't know that. But when you start to show them that, then you can see that there's some behaviors in there on a team perspective that, if you dial those down, then they will support other parts of what they need to do. So it's given us I think it's given us as a team a sense of purpose in terms of what we need to deliver, and that's been a big change for us and the clients.
Yeah, I
can also add to that, and I'm just discovering the team conditions, and already am a huge fan, and think it's taking everything that we have been doing, or I have been doing, and putting it into a nice framework and a nice structure. And an additional tool that I found has been very helpful, methodologies that have been very helpful. And as Kevin mentioned, in the team of Lighthouse, we also have a couple of Agile coaches that the Agile methodologies, which is very aligned with team conditions, and giving people some real tools and real life case studies of how it works. The right mindset, the right communication processes. So feedback loops, constant retrospectives, approaching things on an incremental basis. I think, I of that is also very helpful in when people are feeling anxious, unsure, chaotic, brittle. I think I've personally found the Agile methodologies to be very, very useful, to use it as a toolkit, not doing cut and paste.
Right.
But to really sort of
to
use
do it 100% Scrum or whatever. For me, really, Agile has been a game changer for sure. I think it was the missing ingredient. I think in mainstream team coaching, because I think the whole Agile movement itself is a parallel, larger field of team coaches. They may not call it team coaching, but I think what was missing in mainstream team coaching was really that level of rigor and discipline and those practices that Agile really brought. Because I think a lot of the mainstream team coaches focus a lot on purpose and visioning and composition of the team and behaviors like communication and trust and psychological safety and the like, but was missing visual management, was missing cadences, right? Retrospectives, iterative learning and stuff. So I feel you on that. Anybody else? I'm curious, besides 6 conditions or, anything else on that you kind of use. I don't want the listeners to think that I'm against 4-quadrant color assessments and because actually I was supervising a team coach earlier this week who went in using insights discovery, which you guys may be familiar with, and the 6 conditions. And the leader that just loved insights discovery and also was more of a fan of Lencioni, which was, these 5 kind of behaviors or dysfunctions. Interestingly, what the coach said was they actually had a lot of structural problems. And the problem with Lencioni and insights was it was just focusing on behaviors. And the leader wasn't getting it, that actually that wasn't going to be enough, that actually they needed to do some deeper structural work. So he was really torn because he's like, they really need 6 conditions work, but they're in love with insights discovery. I said, well, you don't have to fight the 2. You can use 6 conditions inside of the 4 colors of insights discovery, and they don't even need to know it's 6 conditions. But, because I was like, meet them where they are. If they really are getting excited about the behaviors, then do some work on the behaviors, but then also say behaviors aren't going to be enough. You also need to put in place. They were really struggling around authority structure, which most teams struggle with, is, the dynamics between the leader and the team. And that's something that needs designing, and it's rarely ever intentionally designed in teams and causes a huge drag. So I see some of your heads nodding. I'm curious if you guys have reactions to that or more to add. Yeah.
I just want to pick up on that because I do think that's maybe the one missing piece for me in the TDS. I think TDS is fantastic and it covers a lot of the structural resource orientation components that teams obviously need to be successful and effective. I love working with some of these kind of personality assessment tools, be it NBI or IOPT, which we worked with a lot in the past. There's a lot of them, and it really, from my perspective, almost doesn't matter. Take your pick, the one that you feel comfortable with. The most important thing isn't the tool, but the conversation that you have with it. And I had some of the most wonderful, insights in teams where people just started not just looking in the mirror a little bit, but then actually sharing their reflection and going, you see that too? Do I really show up like that? And they all go, yeah, it's so you. And you're okay, I didn't. So it's that, and it's also understanding though how that actually plays out in teams. And I remember I was still in my corporate world at the time. We were standing this up in a room, the different kind of quadrants we were all in, and I thought, Christ, yeah. So the people that I find easiest to work with are those standing around me, but the ones I work best with are actually the ones on the opposite end. and so we started to actually do that and use the language of this profiling to say, well, when we need to put a small SWAT team together on a project or a topic, let's make sure we got people from all areas just together, because then it'll be structured and it'll be innovative and it'll be well thought through, but it'll actually happen. That kind of stuff. I think that's hugely beneficial to teams as well, as they start to figure out not just how they're organized and everything, but who they are and what makes them tick.
Agreed.
Yeah, I was laughing, Krista, when you said you'll work with just about any framework that the leader wants to work with, and then you can sort of adapt and bring in interventions from the 6 team conditions or whatever. For me, I'm just happy if you've got a team leader who wants to intentionally work on his or her ability to lead the team. So I'll go with whatever they want, so I will work within a lot of the structural team coaching interventions from the 6 team conditions, and also the emergent, from the key task processes, will fit in very nicely within Lencioni, will fit in very nicely with personality assessments. And so I don't see myself as a, team coach snob. I'll take you where you're at.
Right.
And then integrate some, different tools, different interventions within the framework that you have.
Right on. I think that's, not being dogmatic. I don't think the clients really care. And they don't live and breathe team effectiveness frameworks and models and think about this stuff like we do. They have an hour of bandwidth and attention in a coaching session or in a retreat, and that's their level of thinking they're probably going to do about that topic, right? So
the most important thing, just from my perspective, is keep the tool simple and spend the time on the conversation. And that's it. I mean, so a lot of the stuff we do,
there's no models. There's no. It's just getting them to sit down, talk with each other, maybe do a bit of action learning. You know, troika coaching. Get someone just to step away and listen to what their colleagues are talking about it. And it is so enlightening for the people around, especially if there's a small group of them and they can really get to listen to each other. And those are the sessions that we found the most powerful, where we haven't come in with anything that's structured. It's just getting them to sit with each other. And sometimes it can be a fireside chat. Sometimes it can just leave some space and some silence. Right. And let people talk. And you know, their days are often so structured that this is a revelation.
It's nice to free flow a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So like Kevin said, you know, we try to meet people where they're at, not where we want them to be. You know.
Yeah. I'd love to, you know, building on that. Of, you know, I know always the listeners really like to hear about techniques or anecdotes of where, like, you know, you've had breakthroughs with teams, or so I don't know if you have any, like, you don't have to tell the whole case, but like just things that have really worked. Or, and I know for every team, for one team, it might be an agile practice. For another one, it might be sitting around and having a dialogue like you're talking about, Tim. But I'm curious if you guys are noticing if there's any patterns or things that you guys could share just around breakthroughs and, you know, success stories.
Liz, yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in to say, I mean, for me, the key thing, and I'm actually going to quote something that I heard from Elizabeth many, many years ago. And again, it comes back to the context of, you know, being in the times that we are, starting with your leaders, letting them know that being confidently vulnerable is something that is okay. And not just letting the leaders, but being able to work with the leaders to, and I've done this in many environments and with many leaders, and I'm finding, you know, all of the time, 100%, once you have that conversation with them, it's like, so I don't have to be the one to know it all, or I don't have to, you know, have all the answers for my team or do everything instead of my team. And it's like, no, it's okay. And it's actually a good characteristic. It's being authentic. And then also communicating it to the team members and that's one thing that I've did enjoy in the startup and scale up world, because you've got that culture from the get-go where it's very empowering. Everyone has input into everything. Everyone has input into decision making, bringing new ideas in, innovating, and that of course it's easier in that environment to say, you know, it's not the lead's responsibility to have all the answers, to innovate, to give all the ideas. They're human as well, and we're all in this together. And I found that is, for me, has always been a really powerful.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think there's something from startups there to learn. I think you're right, Liz. But I think it goes back to what I was mentioning earlier around the Cynefin framework, or the complexity, that if the context is one of emergent learning, then the kind of leadership that is required is one of, I can hold this space and be confident, but I don't have the answers. And together we will find our way through the fog. And, you know, hopefully a lighthouse will guide us along the way as well. But anybody else around success stories or kind of things that you found really are resonating or helping create these like transformative shifts in the teams you're working with?
I mean, if Elizabeth and Tim, I think, why don't I kick off the project that the three of us worked on.
Go for it. That's what I was thinking about. Yeah.
And then you guys just fill in the gaps. So in 2021, 2022, Tim, Elizabeth, and I worked with a large corporate client in the Balkan region, and it was a hybrid setup. So whenever there wasn't a lockdown and we could get into the country, we did. Sometimes sessions we didn't know until 24 hours in advance if we were going to get on the plane or if it was going to be MS Teams. But yeah, it was the senior leadership, one of the divisions in this large corporate, board member, B-1, 2. So a total of about 35 leaders from risk. Let's just say that, from risk division. And as we all know, risk division frequently gets a hammering from its internal clients as being the no people. Yeah. And you could see it in the collective psyche of these. They were doing really good work, hard work, but they just and even good, net promoter scores from some of the key external clients, but internally they were just getting hammered. So this particular board member very courageously said, "Hey, you know what? Even in this craziness, pandemic, lockdown, no lockdown, we're going to do something." So Tim, Elizabeth, and I created a 20-month learning journey where I think we threw everything at them, all sorts of different tools. One of the foundations was the 6 team conditions. So we had 6 department heads, the classic within risk, compliance, legal, et cetera. So Tim, Elizabeth, and I took 2 teams each. So we did 6 times, TDS. And so we had that, we would come together, all 35, and I'll never forget, because this was Elizabeth who used this language, bring everyone together, and then we go off in our teams, and then we come back together, and then we go off in our teams, and then we come back together.
Yeah.
And we even threw in some, over a summertime, we did an immersive learning where Tim, Elizabeth, and I created a summer learning journey to get to know your clients better. So how can I meet or exceed the expectations of my clients, go interview my clients? And in parallel, what was really great is that this organization had done an employee engagement survey in 2021 and 2022, and the particular division that we had been working with saw significant improvement compared to some of the other divisions. And now, were we responsible for that? Maybe a little bit. I do believe that we together with a strong leadership that was invested and engaged in this journey, and the tools that we threw at them, and different ways of working, we were really able to help them become more effective collectively and exceed the expectations of their clients.
Culture shift probably within risk, right?
Yeah, I'll throw it out to Elizabeth and Tim. I just wanted to set it up.
I think what was really valuable about the journey is that it had so many different components, and it kept a bit of space and time, right? Because you all know learning happens over time, culture shifts over time. It doesn't happen just in the 3-day workshop. We supported it by coaching. I think that's maybe important. So we coached each of the individual leaders. We split ourselves up as well and really gave them extra support to focus on their specific leadership needs when it came to their specific TDS profiles and their teams and their specific challenges of particular people they were struggling with, or their own personal challenges they were struggling with. So I think that was one other key success factor. And I think what was really, really helpful is that the leader herself was confidently vulnerable at all times.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because I don't think I've ever been so impacted by the end of a team journey with a team than when this particular leader sort of brought it all together right at the end. And she was incredibly powerful and incredibly vulnerable. And in that moment, I saw a group of people who really genuinely were there as a team at the end. And they were all very skeptical to begin with. Everybody starts from a different position, right? But that particular moment was powerful. And yeah, we were a small part of that. But what was incredible is just to watch them taking that on. I always love it when you start off and you're a little bit as a coach, you're a little bit more front and central. But then as you just start to hand that over to the people and they take on their own expectations, their own needs, their own problems, and start to solve them for themselves. And that's what was happening. And it just breathed a life of its own as we got more towards the end, where it was actually quite difficult to hand over. I've got to say, it was a lovely experience, not only for them but for us, I think.
Yeah, and just to throw on top of that, so we kicked off the journey, in the middle of the pandemic and multiple lockdowns, and then as it is a Balkan regional bank bordering Moldova, and Russia. All of a sudden, February 24, 2022 happens. Now we've got the next crisis that was significantly impacting what they were doing. So it was a very powerful experience in that we were on this journey together through a major crisis for that. And I'll never forget that day. we still have photos of it when we finished off December 2020. I got the dates mixed up, but anyway, the 35 of them formed a circle and clapped. So yeah, that was a real powerful experience.
That's a high point. I think you're really describing too, I think, what it takes to lead collectively during a time of uncertainty and even crisis. You use the word crisis, right? Is how do we actually lead in crisis? And you can't do it alone. You can't be a lone wolf. It does require a team. It does require the wisdom of a collective when you can get it aligned. But what I love about your case is it really describes a team of teams type of case, where actually bringing a group together, and that metaphor of coming together all 35 and then splitting off, and that kind of rhythm. I think that's a scaled, approach to working with multiple teams, and that works, right? And if you can get a whole system in the room, in this case, the whole risks department made up of 6 teams, and getting all of them aligned, it's incredible what can happen. I think that honestly will become those will be the organizational models of the future. My feeling is we're going to just, out of necessity, move more and more that way, unless the command and control working group where individuals kind of report into the leader and have a once a week so-called team meeting, which is really a group report out kind of session. Any other anecdotes? And we could also flip to the other side around, what do you guys find challenging, or where are your clients really struggling? Because I think the success stories make us feel good, but I think, and we can learn from those as well, but a lot of times it's in the struggle and in the pain where we get forced to innovate. I know the pandemic forced us to learn how to do everything virtually in shorter time frames and yet still be impactful and engaging, right? But I'm curious, what are the edges, that come to mind as you think about where the clients are struggling and where, you're trying to push the envelope? I don't know if any of those are coming up. I'll pop up a comment here from Joseph while you're thinking a little bit about that question. And
I mean, I'm happy to speak up here, unless Elizabeth, Tim. One thing I learned personally is that not every team is ready for going on a journey, or not every organization is willing to support that. And I had an experience a few years back where I took on an engagement, and intuitively, something did not feel right. My instincts were not. But of course, I thought, okay, maybe I can get in there. I mean, there were a lot of internal high conflict situations taking place that had been going on for years. And then I was sort of brought in there under the umbrella of, okay, team effectiveness, we're going to work together.
Right.
Well.
Try to fix a couple difficult members, right?
Yeah, and then I probably didn't do proper due diligence and do deeper individual interviews and try to get to the core of the problem, and took on that journey almost kind of naively, thinking that, okay, maybe I could do something, but it just, the team wasn't ready, and the organization was kind of using me, actually.
Yeah. That's the dark side of team coaching, and being careful how you can find yourself knee deep in this situation that they weren't honest about what they were really getting you into. And
no, and a year later, the 3 of the team members were fired, including the team leader, which I was able to steer clear of, because everybody knew I was trying to do my best in a really difficult environment. But looking back, I mean, the lesson learned from there was, do my due diligence, be very clear with the leader, what exactly he or she wants to get out of this, why they're doing it, what my role is. That was a hard learning lesson. And
listen to your intuition, because your intuition was telling you something wasn't right. And I'm the same way. Even though my intuition is firing like I should run the other way, I will run into the burning building, to be the hero, or just because I like to get into challenges. And then I've
Yeah.
always regretted, like when my intuition is almost always right. Not always. Intuition isn't infallible, but more often than not, when I ignore its advice, I end up paying some price in that. I see, Tim, you're nodding your head. Does that sound familiar?
I actually, it's funny you said that, because I was about to say something and you've just, for me, it's expectations. The edge for me these days is actually for my own personal self to just dial down all of my expectations when I come into the room, because if I do, then they'll just get blown out of the water straight away.
Mhm.
And it goes back to what we said earlier on about the whole psychological safety, the change that's happening, the Barney world we're living in, as we're now calling it. And people are dealing with so much on top of all the stuff they have to do professionally. And their worlds have merged to beyond a point that we would ever imagine, 2 or 3 years ago, right? And whereas, even 1-2 years ago, I could probably have predicted what's going to happen. These days, I've just stopped because I can't predict it.
Right.
And my own way of looking at it is that I've literally just got to park all of those expectations at the door and just notice when I'm coming up with any sort of assumptions, because I'll be wrong 99% of the time. I will be wrong on what they are bringing into the room. And it's difficult. It can be very, very tough sometimes. It's also an absolute gift because as a coach and a facilitator and all the stuff that we do, you walk out learning so much more, even when things have gone bad. It doesn't always go bad.
Right.
And I think it's just being able to manage those expectations. So that's certainly for me.
Yeah, that's some solid wisdom. I think one of the biggest challenges of doing this work is learning to let go of, like what you're saying, Tim, your expectations, your designs. We're so afraid of anxiety that a lot of times we design our way. We try to control what's not controllable through structure and designing. And there is something about just being centered in yourself and being with the group and breathing and listening a little bit to allow space for what needs to happen without you predetermining how it should go. I think that's, again, part of this idea of how do we engage in emergent learning, where we don't show up with all the answers and let go of expert, right? And again, that doesn't mean throwing away all of our expertise and our tools and all that, but it's not being a slave to them either. Yeah.
I've got to add to that this is the nice thing about the Lighthouse group. And as I sort of mentioned in the beginning, with having sort of 10 to 15 people in the network that are all coming from different experiences, different backgrounds, and that it is really, and it's, credit to Kevin and Peter, who have really sort of created a culture there and an environment where we can all share with each other. So there's, we're all independent freelance consultants, coaches, trainers, but we're working together even when we're working on other projects, coming together and learning from each other, and really sort of also being vulnerable with each other, saying, hey, I've got a client that's got this and not sure if I have all the answers. How would you approach it?
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I call that being a learning team, where I think so much, we tend to focus so much on performance all the time, but actually my experience when I've actually worked with learning teams whose goal was learning, they end up being better performing than the performing teams because they're just in a different mindset and space. But I'm aware, guys, that we're coming up on the hour, and I want to be respectful of your time and give us a little bit of time to wind down here. I'll just pop Joseph's comment up here because he shared that he had used the circle of influence and control recently, and that got the staff talking profoundly about what areas that they thought were important, but also opened up a real frank feedback session between the leaders and staff. So that's good stuff, Joseph. But I want to kind of, give each of you a chance here. And if anybody else is listening, has a comment or question, feel free to pop it in now. Now would be the time. But I want to kind of start to summarize sort of, what's emerging here and give you guys each a chance to make a closing comment or thought about what you're taking away from today, or just anything else you want to share with the listeners here in closing. I'll just say it's been a joy having you guys. And like always, the time just burns by. So But I think what has emerged for me, and this wasn't planned or structured, right, is this whole thing just around, meeting our clients where they are, the kind of leadership and teaming that's essential in today's workplaces. And, this whole idea, I think, of the emergent learning around cycle. I mean, you covered a lot of the ingredients, but I think your story of the team in the Balkans for 18 months, I think, is really a great illustration of, I think, when organizations work really well in situations of complexity and even crisis. And I think the more of that we can do, those team of teams, getting multiple teams that are working as a cluster to work well, is a huge gift that we can bring as team coaches. And frankly, most organizations, people have never grown up learning how to do that. It wasn't socially modeled. So I think if we can help, that becomes more and more the modus for how we actually do work. We'll be more effective. We'll feel safer because we'll be part of a collective, and we're stronger when we're part of a strong group. And just lots of psychosocial needs will be met in addition to achieving great results. So I think that's the headline that I'm taking away from today, but would love to hear briefly from each of you just in closing here, building on that, or your own insight or takeaway from today, or anything else you want to share to be complete for today's learning conversation.
I mean, I'll just build on that. I mean, what you just said there, Krister, and what Liz was saying a little bit earlier, that's how I feel about the people that are right here in this call right now. So if I look at all four of you on my screen, my own team coaching practice has benefited from working together with you, from observing you, from learning about you. I mean, I'm so, I said earlier, I got to the point where I'm about 80% of my engagement with clients right now is around team coaching, performance, and I'm getting closer to 100 because I just really, really enjoy it. And I realize that, whether it's learning from my peers or learning from my clients, every team is different. Every team journey is different. And it just helps me grow. Or doing courses with you, Krister, and the faculty at 6 Team Conditions. Just recently, the master practitioner a couple months ago, I've been what you kept talking about, emergent learning. I've been using all these tools and dumping them into my clients and seeing the results. And I think what really excites me now is I feel like I've kind of reached a point in my career, my own experience with team development over the last, since working, adventure-based therapy with kids to now, and then working with my peers and learning from them and their tips and tricks. I feel like I've gotten better at being able to time the different kinds of interventions that I do, whether it's structural, whether it's emergent. Like I just feel like I got a much better toolbox to be able to meet the client, meet the team where it's at, and help them move along. So I guess that's what I want to say. That my own journey as a team coach has been a fascinating one, and it just makes me even more excited, going forward. And I can only thank you and everyone here on this call that has supported me on that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kevin. Who's next? Liz?
I can jump in next just to, as having just sort of started back in the consulting and sort of being a Lighthouse coach coming from the startup world. I see like all this Barney and VUCA time at the moment as exciting times for us as team coaches, as a positive time for us and what we have to offer. It's been mentioned a few times before because there's such a hunger out there now for the need to really focus on the people and the culture side of things, bringing teams together. Kevin mentioned it before. I think, the days of the team build where we just go and go skiing and get drunk together is, it's still there, but people want more from that now. Even the teams themselves, they say we want not just to go and have fun for a day. We actually want to get some purpose and some, the start of a journey here and help us with this journey. And so that for me is really exciting to be back in this environment. And it's
Nice.
interesting, just one anecdote to give as sort of jumping back into this world of consulting and coaching freshly this year. A lot of comments that have come to me are saying, especially in the world that we're at the moment, the instability and the geopolitical situation that we're facing in the world, why do you want to go into this direction? And I see it as an opposite. As I say, I see it as it's the right time. It's a time where we are needed. And excited
Beautiful.
to be here and excited to be part of doing it together with the Lighthouse colleagues.
Love that.
Just very briefly, I think in times of turbulence, be happy that you're not alone. Be happy you have a team. Tap into it, use each other, be open with each other, listen to each other, and just really build on each other's energy, and then you'll weather the storm. And that's valuable for any team, and it's just as valid for us.
Yep. Love that, Elizabeth.
And it is valuable for us as well. Absolutely. I think for me, it's going back to the emergent learning. It's something that I have become so much more able to be agile myself in the way in which I am with the clients than I ever was, because of working in this sort of environment, which can change at any moment and can give you so many challenges. But like Liz was saying, that's probably why Liz is coming back in. We've got all these opportunities, and it's great. It's absolutely superb. It really is. And I can really see the days where, you know, we're running these sessions which start off as one thing, but as this conversation has become maybe a slightly different thing, and that's fantastic. That's really exciting. So that's what I get from it.
Beautiful, Tim. Well, you guys are rock stars. I think you've done a great job of modeling for the clients, the team leaders, the team coaches listening, you know, one way of how to be successful and thrive, not just survive, but I think thrive in these kind of challenging times. And more to come. We're looking forward to following your guys' work in the future, and love to have you back sometime on the Team Coaching Zone. So thank you for rounding the week out with us. If you're off to the Alps now, skiing, enjoy. I don't know if you guys are still skiing over there this time of year. And if you're just staying in Vienna, I always like to say Vienna is like the best walking city in the world. I love just wandering around Vienna when I was there doing my work. But wish you guys a great finish to your week.
Thanks very much,
Thank
Krista.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Krista. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Krista. And as Billy Joel would sing, Vienna waits for you.
I'm coming back soon. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.